These are the voyages of Chief Justice John Marshall, his 34-year mission to explore strange new laws, to seek out new justice and new constitutional interpretations, to boldly go where no Federalist has gone before.
Created in Article 3 of the Constitution, the judicial branch of the government was created in order to interpret the laws of the land. When created, it was the weakest of the three governmental branches, having the fewest powers and very little in terms of checks and balances on the other governmental branches. The Supreme Court originally was meant to settle disputes involving the Constitution, the laws of the U.S., and treaties. However, this soon changed. John Marshall changed the role of the judicial branch and its powers forever. Appointed in 1813 by fellow Federalist John Adams, John Marshall, a former captain of the Continental Army in the Revolutionary War, maintained his role as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court for 34 years. During his term, he was able to take the Supreme Court truly co-equal with the executive and legislative branches.
The first influential decision came in 1803 in Marbury v. Madison. This was the court decision that created the Supreme Court's power of judicial review, which is the power to look at laws and see if they are constitutional or not. So, near the end of John Adams' term as president, he appointed a large number of justices known as the Midnight Justices because they were appointed so late in his term. Adams was not able to deliver the commissions which would pay the justices to them before he left office. When Jefferson came into office, he ordered James Madison, who is his Secretary of State, not to deliver those commissions. William Marbury, who was one of the Midnight Justices, petitioned the Supreme Court for a writ of mandamus, which would make Madison give him an answer as to why it was that he should not get his commission. When examining this case, the Supreme Court had to look at three things. So, they had to look at whether Marbury actually had the right to his commission. Did U.S. law allow the court to grant him this writ of mandamus? And could the Supreme Court issue that writ?
This power of judicial review was not used again for many years. However, with its creation, the Supreme Court was starting to find its place among the other two branches of the federal government.
In 1819, Dartmouth College v. Woodward was decided. Dartmouth's trustees removed the president from office, and the New Hampshire legislature tried to force it to become a public college, thus allowing the governor to be able to appoint its trustees. Daniel Webster argued for Dartmouth remaining private against William H. Woodward, the secretary of the new state-appointed Board of Trustees. This changed the school's corporate charter by transferring the control of trustee appointments to the governor. Chief Justice Marshall's opinion emphasized that the term contract referred to transactions involving individual property rights, not to the political relations between the government and its citizens. The effect of this is businesses now know that contracts, after they are agreed to, cannot be overturned by legislative action.
This case was very important in regards to the Supreme Court and the judicial branch developing its place among the three branches of government. It allowed judicial review to work not only in Congress, but also in state legislatures too, which developed the role of the judicial branch and more so made it the true interpreter of the laws.
This decision in Dartmouth v. Woodward shows the judicial branch finding its place as the interpreter of laws, declaring things to be constitutional or unconstitutional. This growing strength was seen again in the McCulloch v. Maryland decision.
There were many cases that used judicial review following Marbury v. Madison, but the first were some of the most influential, as it defined judicial review as power of the Supreme Court. McCulloch v. Maryland was one of these cases. In 1816, the Second Bank of the United States was chartered within it with a huge position of being a federal depository and being able to circulate legal currency. By 1818, many state banks were failing due to the competition from the Bank of the United States. Maryland put tax on banks to try to take it out of business by taxing any bank not chartered within the state. The bank of the U.S. Baltimore branch refused to pay the tax, and their cashier, James McCulloch, was sued by Maryland. The state court ruled for Maryland, and McCulloch appealed to the Supreme Court, saying that the tax was unconstitutional. The unanimous Supreme Court outcome declared that the bank was a legitimate constitutional practice, and that Maryland could not tax it under the Supremacy Clause as it undermined superior laws and institutions of the U.S. Let's go down to Andrew in the field to find out more about the important interpretation that came with this decision.
Well, Margot, you essentially said everything that needs to be covered about the Supremacy Clause. However, this case was really important as it set the basis for the uses of the necessary and proper clause in Article 1 of the Constitution. The legislature, in the necessary and proper clause, is given the ability to do anything that they need in order to carry into effect the other powers that are given to them. In McCulloch, it was written, "Let the ends be legitimate, let it be within the scope of the Constitution, and all means which are appropriate, which are plainly adapted to the end, which are not prohibited, but consist with the letter and spirit of the Constitution, are constitutional." This interpretation of the necessary and proper clause set up the standard for when government has the constitutional power to do something. This is why the bank was a constitutional practice, as the bank fell into the category of part of the taxing and commerce power in Article 1. And as such, the necessary and proper clause made having a Bank of the United States constitutional.
This expansion of the Supreme Court's efforts to find its role continued in Gibbons v. Ogden and in Worcester v. Georgia. The power of the federal government was expanded and leading to a more loose interpretation of the Constitution becoming defined.
The Supreme Court was not always so important. When it started, it was the least important of the three branches of government. Then came John Marshall, a Federalist who lived in a time dominated by Democratic Republicans. He was not always agreed with by the general populace, but his decisions led to the development of the power of judicial review. The judiciary branch had finally found its place. Marshall today, Marshall tomorrow, Marshall forever.